Hello, Biddocord fans. Figured we could use a bit more of an educational video. So, today I will be reading the short story Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin. Let's begin. I read about it in the paper, in the subway on my way to work. I read it and I couldn't believe it, and I read it again. Then, perhaps, I just stared at the newsprint spelling out his name, spelling out the story. I stared at it in the swinging lights of the subway car, and in the faces and bodies of the people, and in my own face, trapped in the darkness which roared outside. It was not to be believed, and I kept telling myself that as I walked from the subway station to the high school. And at the same time, I couldn't doubt it. I was scared for Sonny. He became real to me again. A great block of ice got settled in my belly and kept melting there slowly all day long while I taught my classes algebra. It was a special kind of ice. It kept melting, sending trickles of ice water all up and down my veins, but it never got less. Sometimes it hardened and seemed to expand until I felt my guts were going to come spilling out, or that I was going to choke or scream. This would always be at a moment when I was remembering something specific that Sonny had once said or done. When he was about as old as the boys in my classes, his face had been bright and open. There was a lot of copper in it, and he'd had wonderfully direct brown eyes, and great gentleness and privacy. I wondered what he looked like now. He had been picked up the evening before in a raid on an apartment downtown for peddling and using heroin. I couldn't believe it, but what I mean by that is that I couldn't find any room for it anywhere inside me. I had kept it outside me for a long time. I hadn't wanted to know. I had had suspicions, but I didn't name them. I kept putting them away. I told myself that Sonny was wild, but he wasn't crazy, and he'd always been a good boy. He hadn't ever turned hard or evil or disrespectful the way kids can, so quick, especially in Harlem. I didn't want to believe that I'd ever see my brother go down, coming to nothing, all that light in his face gone out, in the condition I'd already seen so many others. Yet it had happened, and here I was, talking about algebra to a lot of boys who might, every one of them for all I know, be popping off needles every time they went to the head. Maybe it did more for them than algebra could. I was sure that the first time Sonny had ever had horse, he couldn't have been much older than these boys were now. These boys now were living as we'd been living then. They were growing up with a rush, and their heads bumped abruptly against the low ceiling of their actual possibilities. They were filled with rage. All they really knew were two darknesses: the darkness of their lives, which was now closing in on them, and the darkness of the movies, which had blinded them to that other darkness, and in which they now vindictively dreamed at once more together than they were at any other time, and more alone. When the last bell rang, the last class ended, I let out my breath. It seemed I'd been holding it for all that time. My clothes were wet. I may have looked as though I'd been sitting in a steam bath all dressed up, all afternoon. I sat alone in the classroom a long time. I listened to the boys outside, downstairs, shouting and cursing and laughing. Their laughter struck me for perhaps the first time. It was not the joyous laughter which, God knows why, one associates with children. It was mocking and insular. Its intent was to denigrate. It was disenchanted, and in this, also, lay the authority of their curses. Perhaps I was listening to them because I was thinking about my brother, and in them I heard my brother, and myself. One boy was whistling a tune, at once very complicated and very simple. It seemed to be pouring out of him as though he were a bird, and it sounded very cool and moving through all that harsh, bright air, only just holding its own through all those sounds. I stood up and walked over to the window and looked down into the courtyard. It was the beginning of the spring, and the sap was rising in the boys. A teacher passed through them every now and again, quickly, as though he or she couldn't wait to get out of that courtyard, to get those boys out of their sight and off their minds. I started collecting my stuff. I thought I'd better get home and talk to Isabel. The courtyard was almost deserted by the time I got downstairs. I saw this boy standing in the shadow of a doorway, looking just like Sonny. I almost called his name. Then I saw it wasn't Sonny, but somebody we used to know, a boy from around our block. He'd been Sonny's friend. He'd never been mine, having been too young for me, and, anyway, I never liked him. And now, even though he was a grown-up man, he still hung around that block, still spent hours on the street corners, was always high and raggy. I used to run into him from time to time, and he'd often work around to asking me for a quarter or 50 cents. He always had some real good excuse, too, and I always gave it to him. I don't know why. But now, abruptly, I hated him. I couldn't stand the way he looked at me, partly like a dog, partly like a cunning child. I wanted to ask him what the hell he was doing in the school courtyard. He sort of shuffled over to me and he said, "I see you got the papers, so I already know about it." "You mean Sonny?" "Yes, I already know about it. How come they didn't get you?" He grinned. It made him repulsive, and it also brought to mind what he looked like as a kid. "I wasn't there. I stay away from them people." "Good for you." I offered him a cigarette, and I watched him through the smoke. "You come all the way down here just to tell me about Sonny?" "That's right." He was sort of shaking his head, and his eyes looked strange, as though they were about to cross. The bright sun deadened his damp, dark brown skin, and it made his eyes look yellow and showed up the dirt in his kinked hair. He smelled funky. I moved a little away from him, and I said, "Well, thanks, but I already know about it, and I got to get home." "I'll walk you a little ways," he said. We started walking. There were a couple of kids still loitering in the courtyard, and one of them said goodnight to me, and looked strangely at the boy beside me. "What are you going to do?" he asked me. "I mean, about Sonny." "Look, I haven't seen Sonny for over a year. I'm not sure I'm going to do anything. Anyway, what the hell can I do?" "That's right," he said quickly. "Ain't nothing you can do. Can't much help old Sonny no more, I guess." It was what I was thinking, and so it seemed to me he had no right to say it. "I'm surprised at Sonny, though," he went on. He had a funny way of talking. He looked straight ahead as though he were talking to himself. "I thought Sonny was a smart boy. I thought he was too smart to get hung." "I guess he thought so too," I said sharply. "And that's how he got hung. And how about you? You're pretty goddamn smart, I bet." Then he looked directly at me, just for a minute. "I ain't smart," he said. "If I was smart, I'd have reached for a pistol a long time ago." "Look, don't tell me your sad story. If it was up to me, I'd give you one." Then I felt guilty. Guilty, probably, for never having supposed that poor bastard had a story of his own, much less a sad one, and I asked quickly, "What's going to happen to him now?" He didn't answer this. He was off by himself someplace. "Funny thing," he said, and from his tone we might have been discussing the quickest way to get to Brooklyn. "When I saw the papers this morning, the first thing I asked myself was if I had anything to do with it. I felt sort of responsible." I began to listen more carefully. The subway station was on the corner just before us, and I stopped. He stopped too. We were in front of a bar, and he ducked slightly, peering in, but whoever he was looking for didn't seem to be there. The jukebox was blasting away with something black and bouncy, and I half watched the barmaid as she danced her way from the jukebox to her place behind the bar. And I watched her face as she laughingly responded to something someone said to her, still keeping time to the music. When she smiled, one saw the little girl, one sensed the doomed, still struggling woman beneath the battered face of the semi-whore. "I never give Sonny nothing," the boy said finally. "But a long time ago, I come to school high, and Sonny asked me how it felt." He paused. I couldn't bear to watch him. I watched the barmaid, and I listened to the music, which seemed to be causing the pavement to shake. I told him it felt great. The music stopped. The barmaid paused and watched the jukebox until the music began again. It did. All this was carrying me someplace I didn't want to go. I certainly didn't want to know how it felt. It filled everything. The people, the houses, the music, the dark, quicksilver barmaid with menace. And this menace was their reality. What's going to happen to him now? I asked again. They'll send him away someplace, and they'll try to cure him. He shook his head. Maybe he'll even think he's kicked the habit. Then they'll let him loose. He gestured, throwing his cigarette into the gutter. That's all. What do you mean, that's all? But I knew what he meant. I mean, that's all. He turned his head and looked at me, pulling down the corners of his mouth. Don't you know what I mean? He asked softly. How the hell would I know what you mean? I almost whispered it. I don't know why. That's right, he said to the air. How would he know what I mean? He turned toward me again, patient and calm, and yet I somehow felt him shaking as though he were going to fall apart. I felt that ice in my guts again, the dread I'd felt all afternoon, and again I watched the barmaid moving about the bar, washing glasses and singing, Listen, they'll let him out, and then it'll just start all over again. That's what I mean. You mean they'll let him out, and then he'll just start working his way back in again? You mean he'll never kick the habit? Is that what you mean? That's right, he said cheerfully. You see what I mean. Tell me, I said at last. Why does he want to die? He must want to die. He's killing himself. Why does he want to die? He looked at me in surprise. He licked his lips. He don't want to die. He wants to live. Don't nobody want to die, ever. Then I wanted to ask him too many things. He could not have answered, or if he had, I could not have won the answers. I started walking. Well, I guess it's none of my business. Gonna be rough on old Sonny, he said. We reached the subway station. This your station? He asked. I nodded. I took one step down. Damn, he said suddenly. I looked up at him. He grinned again. Damn it, if I didn't leave all my money home. You ain't got $1 on you, have you? Just for a couple of days is all. All at once, something inside gave and threatened to come pouring out of me. I didn't hate him anymore. I felt that in another moment I'd start crying like a child. Sure, I said. Don't sweat it. I looked in my wallet and didn't have $1. I only had a 5. Here, I said. That hold you? He didn't look at it. He didn't want to look at it. A terrible closed look came over his face, as though he were keeping the number on the bill a secret from him and me. Thanks, he said. And now he was dying to see me go. Don't worry about Sonny. Maybe I'll ride him or something. Sure, I said. You do that. So long. Be seeing you, he said. I went on down the steps. And I didn't write Sonny, or send him anything for a long time. When I finally did, it was just after my little girl died. He wrote me back a letter, which made me feel like a bastard. Here's what he said. Dear brother, you don't know how much I needed to hear from you. I wanted to write you so many a time, but I dug how much I must have hurt you, and so I didn't write. But now I feel like a man who's been trying to climb up out of some deep, real deep and funky hole, and just saw the sun up there outside. I got to get outside. I can't tell you much about how I got here. I mean, I don't know how to tell you. I guess I was afraid of something, or I was trying to escape from something, and, I've never been very strong in the head. Smile. I'm glad Mama and Daddy are dead and can't see what's happened to their son. And I swear if I'd known what I was doing, I would have never hurt you so. You and a lot of other fine people who were nice to me and who believed in me. I don't want you to think it had anything to do with me being a musician. It's more than that. Or maybe less than that. I can't get anything straight in my head down here, and I try not to think about what's going to happen to me when I get outside again. Sometime I think I'm going to flip and never get outside, and sometime I think I'll come straight back. I tell you one thing, though. I'd rather blow my brains out than go through this again. But that's what they all say, so they tell me. If I tell you when I'm coming to New York, and if you could meet me, I sure would appreciate it. Give my love to Isabel and the kids, and I was so sorry to hear about little Gracie. I wish I could be like Mama and say the Lord's will be done. But I don't know, it seems to me that trouble is the one thing that never does get stopped, and I don't know what good it does to blame it on the Lord. But maybe it does some good if you believe it. Your brother, Sonny. Then I kept in constant touch with him, and I sent him whatever I could, and I went to him when he came back to New York. When I saw him, many things I thought I had forgotten came flooding back to me. This was because I had begun, finally, to wonder about Sonny, about the life that Sonny lived inside. This life, whatever it was, had made him older and thinner, and it had deepened the distant stillness in which he had always moved. He looked very unlike my baby brother, yet when he smiled, when we shook hands, the baby brother I'd never known looked out from the depths of his previous life, his private life, like an animal waiting to be coaxed into the light. "How you been keeping?" he asked me. "All right, and you?" "Just fine." He was smiling all over his face. "It's good to see you again." "It's good to see you." The 7 years difference in our ages lay between us like a charm. I wondered if these years would ever operate between us as a bridge. I was remembering, and it made it hard to catch my breath, that I had been there when he was born, and I had heard the first words he had ever spoken. When he started to walk, when he walked from our mother straight to me, I caught him just before he fell, when he took his first steps he ever took in this world. "How's Isabel?" "Just fine. She's dying to see you." "And the boys?" "They're fine too. They're anxious to see their uncle." "Oh, come on, you know they don't remember me." "Are you kidding? Of course they remember you." He grinned again. We got into a taxi. We had a lot to say to each other, far too much to know how to begin. As the taxi began to move, I asked, "You still want to go to India?" He laughed. "You still remember that?" "Hell no. This place is Indian enough for me." "Used to belong to them," I said, and he laughed again. "They damn sure knew what they were doing when they got rid of it." Years ago, when he was around 14, he'd been all hipped on the idea of going to India. He read books about people sitting on rocks naked, in all kinds of weather, but mostly bad, naturally, and walking barefoot through hot coals and arriving at wisdom. I used to say that it sounded to me as though they were getting away from the wisdom as fast as they could. I think he sort of looked down on me for that. "Do you mind," he asked, "if we have the driver drive alongside the park, on the west side? I haven't seen the city in so long." "Of course not," I said. I was afraid that I might sound as though I were humoring him, but I hoped he wouldn't take it that way. So we drove along between the green of the park and the stony, lifeless elegance of hotels and apartment buildings, toward the vivid, killing streets of our childhood. These streets hadn't changed, though. Housing projects jutted up out of them now like rocks in the middle of a boiling sea. Most of the houses in which we had grown up have vanished, and as had the stores from which we had stolen, the basements in which we had first tried sex, the rooftops from which we had hurled tin cans and bricks. But houses exactly like the houses of our past yet dominated the landscape. Boys exactly like the boys we once had been found themselves smothering in these houses, came down into the streets for light and air, and found themselves encircled by disaster. Some escaped the trap, but most didn't. Those who got out always left something of themselves behind, as some animals amputate a leg and leave it in the trap. It might be said, perhaps, that I had escaped. After all, I was a school teacher, or that Sonny had. He hadn't lived in Harlem for years. Yet, as the cab moved uptown through streets which seemed with a rush to darken with dark people, and as I covertly studied Sonny's face, it came to me that what we both were seeking through our separate cab windows was that part of ourselves which had been left behind. It's always at the hour of trouble and confrontation that the missing member aches. We had hit 110th Street and started rolling up Lenox Avenue, and I'd known this avenue all my life, but it seemed to me again, as it had seemed on the day I'd first heard of Sonny's troubles, filled with a hidden menace, which was its very breath of life. "We're almost there," said Sonny. "Almost." We were both too nervous to say anything more. We live in a housing project. It hasn't been up long. A few days after it was up, it seemed uninhabitably new. Now, of course, it's already run down. It looks like a parody of the good, clean, faceless life. God knows the people who live in it do their best to make it a parody. The beat-looking grass lying around isn't enough to make their lives green. The hedges will never hold out the streets, and they know it. The big windows fool no one. They aren't big enough to make space out of no space. They don't bother with the windows. They watch the TV screen instead. The playground is most popular with the children who don't play at jacks or skip rope or roller skate or swing, and they can be found in it after dark. We moved in partly because it's not too far from where I teach, and partly for the kids. But it's really just like the houses in which Sonny and I grew up. The same things happen. They'll have the same things to remember. The moment Sonny and I started into the house, I had the feeling that I was simply bringing him back into the danger he had almost died trying to escape. Sonny has never been talkative, so I don't know why I was sure he'd be dying to talk to me when supper was over the first night. Everything went fine. The oldest boy remembered him, and the youngest boy liked him. And Sonny had remembered to bring something for each of them. And Isabel, who's really much nicer than I am, and more open and giving, had gone to a lot of trouble about dinner and was genuinely glad to see him. And she's always been able to tease Sonny in a way that I haven't. It was nice to see her face so vivid again, and to hear her laugh and watch her make Sonny laugh. She wasn't, or anyway, she didn't seem to be, at all uneasy or embarrassed. She chatted as though there were no subject which had to be avoided, and she got Sonny past his first faint stiffness. And thank God she was there, for I was filled with that icy dread. Everything I did seemed awkward to me, and everything I said sounded freighted with hidden meaning. I was trying to remember everything I'd heard about dope addiction, and I couldn't help watching Sonny for signs. I wasn't doing it out of malice. I was trying to find out something about my brother. I was dying to hear him tell me he was safe. Take a sip of water. Safe, my father grunted. Whenever Mama suggested trying to move to a neighborhood where trying to be safer for children. Safe? Hell, ain't no place safe for kids. No nobody. He always went on like this, but he wasn't ever really as bad as he sounded, not even on weekends when he got drunk. As a matter of fact, he was always on the lookout for something a little better. But he died before he found it. He died suddenly during a drunken weekend in the middle of the war when Sonny was 15. He and Sonny hadn't ever gotten on too well, and this was partly because Sonny was the apple of his father's eye. It was because he loved Sonny so much and was frightened for him that he was always fighting with him. It doesn't do any good to fight with Sonny. Sonny just moves back inside himself where he can't be reached. But the principal reason that they never hit it off is that they were so much alike. Daddy was big and rough and loud talking, just the opposite of Sonny, but they both had that same privacy. Mama tried to tell me something about this just after Daddy died. I was home on leave from the army. This was the last time I ever saw my mother alive. Just the same, this picture gets all mixed up in my mind with pictures I had of her when she was younger. The way I always see her is the way she used to be on a Sunday afternoon, say when the old folks were talking, after the big Sunday dinner. I always see her wearing pale blue. She'd be sitting on the sofa, and my father would be sitting in the easy chair. Not far from her, and the living room would be full of choked folks and relatives. There they sit in chairs all around the living room, and the night is creeping up outside, but nobody knows it yet. You can see the darkness growing up against the window panes, and you hear the street noises every now and then, or maybe the jangling beat of a tambourine from one of the churches close by, but it's real quiet in the room. For a moment, nobody's talking, but every face looks darkening, like the sky outside. And my mother rocks a little from the waist, and my father's eyes are closed, but everyone is looking at something a child can't see. For a minute, they've forgotten their children. Maybe a kid is lying on the rug, half asleep. Maybe somebody's got a kid in his lap and is absent-mindedly stroking the kid's head. Maybe there's a kid, quiet and big-eyed, curled up in the big chair in the corner. The silence, the darkness coming, and the darkness in the faces frightens the child obscurely. He hopes that the hand which strokes his forehead will never stop, will never die. He hopes that there will never come a time when the old folks won't be sitting around the living room, talking about where they've come from and what they've seen and what's happening to them and their kinfolk. But something deep and watchful in the child knows that this is bound to end, is already ending. In a moment, someone will get up and turn on the light. Then the old folks will remember the children and they won't talk any more that day. And when light fills the room, the child is filled with darkness. He knows that every time this happens, he's moved just a little closer to that darkness outside. The darkness outside is what the old folks have been talking about. It's what they've come from. It's what they endure. The child knows that they won't talk anymore because if he knows too much about what's happened to them, he'll know too much too soon about what's going to happen to him. The last time I talked to my mother, I remember I was restless. I wanted to get out and see Isabel. We weren't married then, and we had a lot to straighten out between us. There, Mama sat in black by the window. She was humming an old church song. Lord, you brought me from a long ways off. Sonny was out somewhere. Mama kept watching the streets. I don't know, she said, if I'll ever see you again after you go off from here, but I hope you'll remember the things I tried to teach you. Don't talk like that, I said, and smiled. You'll be here for a long time yet. She smiled too, but she said nothing. She's cried for a long time. And I said, Mama, don't you worry about nothing. I'll be writing all the time, and you'll be getting the checks. I want to talk to you about you and your brother, she said suddenly. If anything happens to me, he ain't going to have nobody to look out for him. Mama, I said, ain't nothing going to happen to you or Sonny. Sonny's all right. He's a good boy, and he's got good sense. It ain't a question of his being a good boy, Mama said, nor of his having good sense. It ain't only the bad ones, nor yet the dumb ones, that get sucked under. She stopped, looking at me. Your daddy once had a brother, she said, and she smiled in a way that made me feel like she was in pain. You didn't never know that, did you? No, I said. I never knew that. And I watched her face. Oh, yes, she said. Your daddy had a brother. She looked out of the window. Again. I know you never saw your daddy cry, but I did. Many a time through all these years. I asked her, what happened to his brother? How come nobody's ever talked about him? This was the first time I ever saw my mother look old. His brother got killed when he was just a little younger than you are now. I knew him. He was a fine boy. He was maybe a little full of the devil, but he didn't mean nobody no harm. Then she stopped, and the room went silent, exactly as it had sometimes been on those Sunday afternoons. Mama kept looking out into the street. He used to have a job in the mill, she said, and like all young folks, he just liked to perform on Saturday nights. Saturday nights, him and your father would drift around to different places, go to dances and things like that, or just sit around with people they knew, and your father's brother would sing. He had a fine voice, and play along with himself on his guitar. Well, this particular Saturday night, him and your father was coming home from some place, and they were both a little drunk, and there was a moon that night. It was bright like day. Your father's brother was feeling kind of good, and he was whistling to himself, and he had his guitar slung over his shoulder. They was coming down a hill, and beneath them was a road that turned off from the highway. Well, your father's brother, he being always kind of frisky, decided to run down this hill. And he did, with that guitar banging and clanging behind him. And he ran across the road, and he was making water behind a tree. And your father was sort of amused at him, and he was still coming down the hill kind of slow. And he heard a car motor, and that same minute, his brother stepped from behind the tree into the road in the moonlight, and he started to cross the road. and your father started to run down the hill. He says he didn't know why. His car was full of white men, and they was all drunk. And when they seen your father's brother, they let out a great whoop and holler, and they aimed the car straight at him. They was having fun. They just wanted to scare him the way they do sometimes, you know. But they was drunk, and I guess the boy being drunk too, and scared, and kind of lost of his head. By the time he jumped, it was too late. Your father says he heard his brother scream when the car rolled over him, and he heard the wood of that guitar when it give, and he heard them strings go flying, and he heard them right men shouting, and the car kept on a-going, and it ain't stopped till this day. In time your father got down the hill, his brother wa'n't nothing but blood and pulp. Tears were gleaming on my mother's face. There wasn't anything I could say. He never mentioned it, 'cause I never let him mention it before you children. Your daddy was like a crazy man that night, and for many a night thereafter. He says he never in his life seen anything as dark as that road after the lights of that car had gone away. Wa'n't nothing. Wa'n't nobody on that road. Just your daddy and his brother and that busted guitar. Oh yes, your daddy never did really get right again. To the day he died, he won't show but that every white man he saw was the man that killed his brother. She stopped and took out her handkerchief and dried her eyes, and she looked at me. I ain't telling you all this, he said, to make you scared or bitter or to make you hate nobody. I'm telling you this 'cause you got a brother, and the world ain't changed. I guess I didn't want to believe this. I guess she saw this in my face. She turned away from me, toward the window again, searching those streets. But I praise my dreamer, she said at last, that he called your daddy home before me. I ain't saying it to throw no flowers at myself, but I declare it keeps me from feeling too cast down to know I helped your father get safely through this world. Your father always acted like he was the roughest, strongest man on earth, and everybody took him to be like that. But if he hadn't had me there to see his tears... She was crying again. Still, I couldn't move. I said, Lord, Lord, Mama, I didn't know it was like that. Oh, honey, she said, there's a lot you don't know, but you are going to find it out. She stood up from the window and came over to me. You got to hold on to your brother, she said, and don't let him fall, no matter what it looks like is going to happen to him, and no matter how evil you gets with him. You are going to be evil with him many a time, but don't you forget what I told you, you hear? I won't forget, I said. Don't you worry, I won't forget. I won't let nothing happen to Sonny. My mother smiled as though she were amused at something she saw in my face. Then, you may not be able to stop nothing from happening, but you got to let him know you's there. 2 days later, I was married, and then I was gone. And I had a lot of things on my mind. I pretty well forgot my promise to Mama until I got shipped home on a special furlough for her funeral. And after the funeral, with just Sonny and me alone in the empty kitchen, I tried to find something about him. What do you want to do? I asked him. I'm going to be a musician, he said. For he had graduated in the time I had been away, from dancing to the jukebox, to finding out who was playing what, and what they were doing with it, and he had bought himself a set of drums. You mean you want to be a drummer? I somehow had the feeling that being a drummer might be alright for other people, but not for my brother Sonny. I don't think, he said, looking at me very gravely, that I'll ever be a good drummer, but I think I can play a piano. I frowned. I had never played the role of the older brother quite so seriously before, had scarcely ever, in fact, asked Sonny a damn thing. I sensed myself in the presence of something I didn't really know how to handle, didn't understand. So I made my frown a little deeper as I asked, what kind of musician do you want to be? He grinned. How many kinds do you think there are? Be serious, I said. He laughed, throwing his head back and looked at me. I am serious. Well then, for Christ's sake, stop kidding around and answer a serious question. I mean, do you want to be a concert pianist? Do you want to play classical music and all that? Or what? Long before I finished, he was laughing again. For Christ's sake, Sonny. He sobered with difficulty. I'm sorry, but you sound so scared. And he was off again. Well, you may think it's funny now, baby, but I'm not. But it's not gonna be so funny when you have to make your living at it. Let me tell you that. I was furious because I knew he was laughing at me and I didn't know why. No, he said, very sober and afraid, perhaps, that he'd hurt me. I don't want to be a classical pianist. That isn't what interests me. I mean, he paused, looking at me hard, as though his eyes would help me to understand, and then gestured helplessly, as though perhaps his hand would help. I mean, I'll have a lot of studying to do, and I'll have to study everything, but, I mean, I want to play with jazz musicians. He stopped. I want to play jazz, he said. Well, the word had never before sounded as heavy, as real as it sounded that afternoon in Sonny's mouth. I just looked at him, and I was probably frowning, a real frown by this time. I simply couldn't see why on earth he'd want to spend his time hanging around nightclubs, clowning around on bandstands while people pushed each other around a dance floor. It seemed beneath him, somehow. I had never thought about it before, had never been forced to, but I suppose I had always put jazz musicians in a class with what Daddy called good time people. Are you serious? Hell yes, I'm serious. He looked more helpless than ever, and annoyed, and deeply hurt. I suggested, helpfully, You mean like Louis Armstrong? His face closed as though I'd struck him. No, I'm not talking about none of that old-time, down-home crap. Well, look, Sonny, I'm sorry. Don't get mad. I just don't altogether get it, that's all. Name somebody you know, a jazz musician you admire. Bird. Who? Bird. Charlie Parker. Don't they teach you nothing in the goddamn army? I lit a cigarette. I was surprised and then a little amused to discover that I was trembling. I've been out of touch, I said. You'll have to be patient with me. Now, who's this Parker character? He's just one of the greatest jazz musicians alive, said Sonny sullenly, his hands in his pocket, his back to me. Maybe the greatest, he added bitterly. That's probably why you never heard of him. All right, I said. I'm ignorant. I'm sorry. I'll go out and buy all the Cats records right away, all right? It don't, said Sonny with dignity, make any difference to me. I don't care what you listen to. Don't do me no favors. I was beginning to realize that I'd never seen him so upset before. With another part of my mind, I was thinking that this would probably turn out to be one of those things kids go through and that I shouldn't make it seem important by pushing it too hard. Still, I didn't think it would do any harm to ask. Doesn't all this take a lot of time? Can you make a living at it? He turned back to me and half leaned, half sat on the kitchen table. Everything takes time, he said. And, well, yes, sure, I can make a living at it. But what I don't seem to be able to make you understand is that it's the only thing I want to do. Well, Sonny, I said gently, you know, people can't always do exactly what they want to do. No, I don't know that, said Sonny, surprising me. I think people ought to do what they want to do. What else are they alive for? You're getting to be a big boy, I said desperately. It's time you started thinking about your future. I'm thinking about my future, said Sonny grimly. I think about it all the time. I gave up. I decided if he didn't change his mind that we could always talk about it later. In the meantime, I said, you got to finish school. We had already decided that he'd have to move in with Isabel and her folks. I knew this wasn't the ideal arrangement because Isabel's folks are inclined to be dicty, and they hadn't especially wanted Isabel to marry me. But I didn't know what else to do. And we have to get you fixed up at Isabel's. There was a long silence. He moved from the kitchen table to the window. That's a terrible idea. You know it yourself. Do you have a better idea? He just walked up and down the kitchen for a minute. He was as tall as I was. He had started to shave. I suddenly had the feeling that I didn't know him at all. He stopped at the kitchen table and picked up my cigarettes, looking at me with a kind of mocking, amused defiance. He put one between his lips. You mind? You smoking already? He lit the cigarette and nodded, watching me through the smoke. I just wanted to see if I'd have the courage to smoke in front of you. He grinned and blew a great cloud of smoke to the ceiling. It was easy. He looked at my face. Come on now, I bet you was smoking at my age. Tell the truth. I didn't say anything, but the truth was on my face, and he laughed. But now there was something very strange in his laugh. Sure, and I bet that ain't all you was doing. He was frightening me a little. Cut the crap, I said. We already decided that you was going to go and live at Isabel's. Now what's gotten into you all of a sudden? You decided it, he pointed out. I didn't decide nothing. He stopped in front of me, leaning against the stove, arms loosely folded. Look, brother, I don't want to stay in Harlem no more. I really don't. He was earnest. He looked at me, then over to the kitchen window. There was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Some thoughtfulness, some worry all his own. He rubbed the muscle of one arm. It's time I was getting out of here. Where do you want to go, Sonny? I want to join the Army or the Navy. I don't care. If I say I'm old enough, they'll believe me. Then I got mad. And it was because I was so scared. You must be crazy, you goddamn fool. What the hell do you want to go and join the Army for? I just told you. To get out of Harlem. Sonny, you haven't even finished school. If you want to be a musician, how do you expect to study if you're in the Army? He looked at me, trapped in an anguish. There's ways. I might be able to work out some kind of deal. Anyway, I'll have the GI Bill when I come out. If you come out. We stared at each other. Sonny, please, be reasonable. I know the setup is far from perfect, but we got to do the best we can. I ain't learned nothing from school, he said, even when I go. He turned away from me and opened the window and threw his cigarette out into the narrow alley. I watched his back. At least I ain't learning nothing you'd want me to learn. He slammed the window down so hard I thought the glass would come flying out and turned back to me. And I'm sick of the stink of these garbage cans. Sonny, I said, I know how you feel, but if you don't finish school now, you're going to be sorry later that you didn't. I grabbed him by the shoulders. And you only got another year. It ain't so bad, and I'll come back, and I swear I'll help you do whatever you want to do. Just try to put up with it till I come back. Will you please do that for me? He didn't answer. He wouldn't look at me. Sonny, you hear me? He pulled away. I hear you, but you never hear anything I say. I didn't know what to say to that. He looked out the window and then back to me. Okay, he said and sighed. I'll try. Then I said, trying to cheer him up a little. They got a piano at Isabel's. Practice on it. And as a matter of fact, it did cheer him up for a minute. That's right, he said to himself. I forgot that. His face relaxed a little, but the worry, the thoughtfulness played on it still. The way shadows play on a face which is staring into the fire. There's still quite a few pages to this, and my throat and mouth is getting tired. So I think I'm going to stop this here. But if you enjoyed, you can realistically find this online pretty easily. You should be able to just search up Sunny Blues and it should be available quite easily. I finished on I don't know what page this is, but you know, it's right after he learns about Isabel having a piano, so should be a good identifier. Regardless, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll be finishing this piece later in my own free time. Goodbye.